We are delighted to have you with us for part 2 of the 2-part series entitled Contemplative Verses, Echoes of the Poet Shelley, Vegetarian. Percy Bysshe Shelley is considered to be one of the most exceptional creative writers of the English language. In his relatively short human life, Shelley produced a voluminous output of work, mainly poems, but also prose literature, dramatizations, academic and philosophical essays, critical reviews, and English translations of both classical and contemporary authors. His genius continues to enthrall lovers of literature. Percy Bysshe Shelley was as intent on investigating his own essential nature as he was to developing his poetry. He contemplated a life devoted to metaphysics, but eventually chose to dedicate himself to literature. Not forgetting the privileged circumstances of his birth, he believed wholeheartedly that it was his sacred duty to write for the benefit of the public and build on the momentum already created by poets such as William Blake and William Wordsworth, who were both also vegetarians, as well as Samuel Taylor Coleridge. All these great poets had expressed sentiments similar to his own, brought to a head by a pervading social trend of pure rationalism and the arrival of the Industrial Revolution, which they viewed as devastating to the human spirit. Shelley is now considered a part of the artistic movement known as Romanticism, which also includes his friends Lord Byron, Robert Southey, and John Keats, as well as painters and composers such as J.M.W. Turner and Ludwig van Beethoven, all of whom, in their own way, sought to keep intangible notions alive by employing themes reflected in the classics and nature, in response to an ever-encroaching material age. Shelley asks life's important questions in his book, A Defense of Poetry and Other Essays, written in 1821.
What is life? Thoughts and feelings arise, with or without our will, and we employ words to express them. We are born, and our birth is unremembered, and our infancy remembered but in fragments. We live on, and in living we lose the apprehension of life. How vain is it to think that words can penetrate the mystery of our being. Rightly used, they may make evident our ignorance to ourselves, and this is much. For what are we? Whence do we come? And whither do we go? Is birth the commencement? Is death the conclusion of our being? What is birth and death?
Inspired by archaeological discoveries in Egypt, Shelley's interest shifted to the ancient world. The histories of Diodorus Siculus, the theme of an ephemeral world, and the idea of the illusory self would be most eloquently explored in what was to become not only one of Shelley's most recognizable works, but also one of the best-known sonnets in the history of literature, Ozymandias.
I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, yea mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away.
In the summer of 1815, Shelley spent a lot of time at Windsor Great Park, a forested reserve, reclining under the great shady oaks. There, a complex work was born, In Alastor, or The Spirit of Solitude, the poet takes the reader on a fantastic voyage of discovery through his meandering contemplations, clothed in natural and geographical phenomena. The deeds of past warriors and phantom maidens take us from ocean to mountaintop. Influenced by Shelley's own recent preoccupations with mortality, Alastor tells the story of a poet who is in a desperate search for permanent truth, which remains all but elusive. The poem's title was suggested by fellow author Thomas Love Peacock, who remained one of Shelley's close, lifelong friends. In Prometheus Unbound, Shelley organized his poetry into a closet drama with 4 acts, reconstructing the ancient Greek legend of Titan Prometheus. In the legend, Prometheus was imprisoned in the Caucasus Mountains by the gods under the command of Jupiter, known as Zeus in Greek mythology, and was continually punished for giving fire to humanity. Although loosely based on the work of the ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus, Shelley's Prometheus is a symbol of love, who overcomes his oppressor without motivations of revenge, only feeling pity for the force that had inflicted crimes upon humans and Mother Earth. It is his love and forgiveness that gives him strength to triumph over his detainment, even overcoming death and thus freeing humanity and Mother Earth. Prometheus becomes a Christ-like figure, suffering as Lord Jesus Christ did on the cross. Shelley wrote many other great and epic poems, including Julian and Medulla, To a Skylark, The Revolt of Islam, and Epipsychidion. Continuing his all-consuming contemplation, these poetic works display Shelley's now familiar style of imagery adopted from nature, as well as employing signposts from the lore of the ancient world. Perhaps Shelley's favorite poetic theme was that of love, which he weaved into his writing in various manifestations as the sacred force that unifies all things. Not all of his poems were dense and complex epics. The poet and author also spoke volumes when demonstrating his genius for word economy. This is evident in his cherished and concise Love's Philosophy.
The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever, with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine, in one spirit, meet and mingle. Why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven, if it disdained its brother. And the sunlight clasps the earth, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What is all this sweet work worth, if thou kiss not me?
Percy Bysshe Shelley left England for health reasons in 1818 with his wife and young family. He then travelled the European continent, and the scenic locations of Switzerland and Italy in particular provided a great deal of inspiration for his work. While living on the northern Italian coast in 1821, word reached Shelley that fellow poet and friend John Keats, who he had met in 1816, had succumbed to tuberculosis in Rome. Devastated by the news, Shelley went on to compose 55 lines of poetry, completing another one of his best-known works, Adonais, an elegy on the death of John Keats, author of Endymion, Hyperion, etc., ultimately declaring that the poet who he understood and loved was not dead. Shelley writes how it is the living who are dead. The poem is laced with references to John Keats's poems, such as the well-known Ode to a Grecian Urn. Shelley described the poem as his least imperfect literary effort.
Peace, peace, he is not dead, he doth not sleep. He hath awakened from the dream of life. 'Tis we, who lost in stormy visions, keep with phantoms an unprofitable strife. Excerpt from Adonais by P.B. Shelley, vegetarian.
Shelley was soon to join his poet brother John Keats. in July 1822, when he was just 29 years old, his sailing boat succumbed to a storm and his body was found on the Mediterranean coast. In his jacket pocket was found a copy of John Keats's Lamia. He was cremated on the beach with friends, including Lord Byron. Shelley's heart refused to be consumed upon the funeral pyre, and it was later wrapped in a manuscript of Adonais and presented to his wife Mary. Upon his memorial stone were inscribed the words of fellow immortal poet William Shakespeare.
Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange.
With inspired hearts, we are grateful for the brilliant literary contributions of Percy Bysshe Shelley, whose works evoke our yearning for greater love and higher truths.